Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. My name is Max Hoberman. I'm the CEO of Certain Affinity. We're a studio based out of Austin, Texas. We also have a, second office location up in Toronto, but we're a very large indie, very large independent game developer. Um, we do a lot of work on a lot of games and a lot of shooters in particular. So we do a lot of what typically what we call co-development, although we're in the process of shifting more and more work to original game development, lead development. But in our history, God, we've been around for a long time. We've been around. I founded the company at the end of 2006, and in that time, I think we've probably worked on about 40 different independent, releases, full games that we contributed to, full games we developed in their entirety, co-development, post-release like DLC support, et cetera, et cetera. And I've lost track of how many of those were Halo games, but a lot. we, I think the very first when I started the company, the very first thing we did was the Halo 2 Blastacular Map Pack, and then all the way through many many games and iterations, all the way through to work on Halo Infinite, even up till recently. So yeah, among other things.
Thanks, Max. I think with this introduction, you already answered some of my question.
I anticipated that. Yeah. So yeah, lots of history with Halo, even history prior to founding Certain Affinity with Halo. So
I'm just curious, is this your first time joining a French podcast?
yeah, I think so. Uh, yeah, probably. I don't talk publicly very often. One of the downsides of doing co-development is, much of what we work is super confidential, top secret, and then we're not the publisher or the lead developer often, so we're not out there publicly talking about our work. So yeah, it's very rare that I talk publicly with anyone, especially anyone in France.
Oh, by the way, if you have some issue understanding my question, thanks to my terrible French accent, please tell me and I will repeat them in the
Good.
right and better way.
So far, so good.
Actually, you were saying you don't speak publicly too often, and honestly, for a lot of people, especially designer, I think we would love to hear more about your experience and your wisdom regarding well game design and
Yeah.
everything related.
No, I appreciate that. I think the reality is that since I started, before I started Certain Affinity, I was full time designer and design, and lead. And after I founded Certain Affinity, I became a full time businessman and a part time developer, right? So I think what I can actually talk about, like I try and keep what I talk about to things that I personally was hands on involved with, work that I did personally, and yeah, it's very light touch on the development side since I founded Certain Affinity. Right, every once in a while I'll get involved or I'll roll up my sleeves, but it's pretty rare. Although interestingly, right now I don't know if you heard, I hired a really big name guy, awesome guy, to be our president and chief operating officer, Paul Sams. He was the COO at Blizzard for about 20 years. We hired him, and I hired him to run the business side of the house last fall, so as to free me up to actually focus on leading our development efforts. So as part of that, I've actually been much more hands-on as the game director for a brand new original game that we're building a playable demo for, and we're going to be out pitching. I'll be in your neighborhood. I'm going to be at Gamescom behind closed doors pitching our game with a hands-on demo in Germany, end of August. So yeah, I'm much more involved in development. But yeah, going back to what you're saying, in since I wasn't able to talk about a lot of my old work, at some point I just decided I would start posting about it on Twitter, and I started posting old, snippets from design documents. I'm sure you saw some of the old paper designs for maps and systems from Halo 2 and Halo 3. Um, so yeah, I think there's actually a lot there. Over the past few years, I shared a ton there. So any old Halo related topic, multiplayer, online UI topic you're interested in, if you look me up on Twitter and you search specifically in my tweets, you can probably find something. Um, So yeah, but
Yeah, it's been so nice of you for sharing this design document. Today is more focused about the business aspect of video game, but would you be up to come back for another episode dedicated to game design?
yeah, yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. I was hesitating because I was trying to think about whether there's anything that I can say that I haven't already said. Because you mentioned the the podcast that I did with Bravo, the Halo, what was it, Halo 2 Artifacts podcast. And I man, that was so in depth about stuff that I mean, if there's something you want to know more about and you find interesting, I'm happy to chat about it. I can't guarantee it isn't something I've already talked about, but sure. Yeah.
Oh, you would be surprised that some of us still have some question we can't find answer for yet, and especially for very little tiny details.
Ah, well, I know I appreciate that. I think we have a little bit of time before your other guest shows up, right? Um, so I'm gonna throw a design question my way, just real quick before we get into the business. I'm curious. Give me a sample.
Oh, actually, I would love to know your opinion about like innovation in the video game industry and how allowing anyone on the Xbox platform to get all the services you created for Halo 2 might have standardized the approach to online gaming. But actually, right now, I didn't note any in
All right,
particular.
putting you on the spot. You know. I'll tell you something then is sort of design related, tangential, distantly design related. So um, years ago, I um, I did some classes here in Austin, which is my home city, which was a whole string of classes, which was comedy improv training. Have you ever seen improv or done improv classes?
Actually, before being a designer, I was comedian in the South of France for
Oh, there
many
we go.
years.
You know. Well, so what I was going to say, it's tangentially related because there's something about that sort of improv style, improvisational ideation, sort of problem solving ideation that I find is really there's a lot in common, and it's a useful tool for problem solving in design. So I actually since I took all those classes, I've facilitated a couple sessions here or there for Certain Affinity where our staff and especially our designers basically can attend for free and learn some of the improv techniques because I actually find the the process of sort of solving problems in a completely unfiltered way is something that I'm very good at, but most people are not. Most people self-censor and they self-filter and they assume there's constraints on any given design problem that don't aren't necessarily real constraints. So I think there's something inherent in the improv sort of at least the comedy version of improv, the comedy improv training that's actually really beneficial. And as a group, when you're brainstorming as a group, I find it's really is really useful. I think I already do it inherently, but it gave me some good tools to be able to work with others and do it in a more structured manner. So there's a little design tidbit for you because since I'm on the spot asking you for improv, I'll get myself in trouble if I go too far down the design path because, like I said, I'm only really getting back into development like the majority of my time since last fall. So I'm still dipping my toes in it anyway. So no worries.
Actually, when we first talked together, it was following a tweet you did where you said one advice you gave to people wanting to start a video game studio was to figure if they wanted to make a successful business or a video game, and that depending on the answer, the course of action might be very different.
Yeah, sure. I think I'm trying to remember that tweet. I think it was in response to somebody. I didn't just tweet that out of the blue. I think I was replying to someone, but I don't actually remember the specifics anymore of who I was replying to or why. I think there is this is actually a sort of I don't know if philosophy is the right word, but it's a strategy that I think I've always employed. It's everything comes back to prioritization, right? Um, you want to. We have a expression in the U.S. I don't know. You have a similar. I'm curious. Do you have a similar expression in French? We have an expression that says you can't have your cake and eat it too. Do you know that expression?
Yeah, in France, we have something like this. I don't know if it will translate well, but basically the saying goes as you can't have the butter, the money from the butter, and the woman doing the butter.
I like that even better. There you go. So it's the same concept, I think, and what it really speaks to in my mind, it really speaks to priorities, right? Um, you can prioritize everything. You can prioritize having your cake. You can prioritize eating cake, eating butter, having the butter made, whatever whatever it is. You can have all of those things be priorities for you, but they can't all be equal priority, right? At some point, something is going to happen that's going to force you to prioritize one higher than the other, right? You can't say all of these things are my highest priority. Um, you have to have a metric that when push comes to shove, another expression we say here, when you are forced to choose between these things, even though you want them both, what how are you going to decide which you go with? And what I've always told people is if your if your primary motivation for starting a business is because you want to make your dream game, right? Or you have some idealized scenario about you want to make a game in this type of environment, or you want to make this specific game that you have a vision for and you're unwilling to compromise on that vision, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If that's your driving motivation and that is ultimately maintaining that privilege, being able to make your game whatever with no one telling you what to do, if that is your highest priority, um, then running a successful business is going to be lower priority, and there's going to come a point in time where you're forced to choose between those two things, right? Is it all about not compromising on my vision, or is it about what is higher priority, not compromising on my vision for the game or running a successful business? If not compromising on your vision for your game or whatever idealized scenario you have is your highest priority, well, then you're going to make decisions that cause your business to suffer, right? Um, so, what I've always told people is if you're going to start a business, then running a successful business should be your highest priority, right? There are ways to make your dream game um, that don't have to, that don't you don't have to compromise the business realities. You don't have to compromise the viability of the business in order to do it. So it's just for me, it's always felt like a very um, if you're going to start a business, then that should be your goal to make a successful business. And making your dream game, that's fine. That can be a secondary goal. That can be as we say in development, a P1, priority two, priority three. I'm sure you're familiar with that lexicon. That's fine. Making your dream game without compromise can still be your goal, but make that a P2 goal, not a P1 goal, right? Running a successful business should be your P1 goal. Um, Otherwise, ultimately, your dream of creating your own game or your own perfect scenario, it's going to fall apart anyway because your business is going to suffer. You're going to make decisions in order to maintain the integrity of your vision that are contrary to your business goals. Your business is going to suffer, and that's going to have a cascade of consequences, which ultimately cause you to not be able to realize your what you were prioritizing as your P1 goal. So prioritizing your business, if you do it successfully, that can enable you to do your dream game, right? If your business is successful, that can open doors and be an enabler that allows you to subsequently make your dream game and not have to compromise. But the order of operations matters, right? Yeah, yeah, it's messy, but I'm trying to rationalize it.
No, no, I think it's actually very clear. Like, to move forward with a project, it's important to focus on certain aspect and not to try to do all of them at the same time. Like, when you started Certain Affinity, I think you were 30, something like this, right?
Yeah, 31. I was 31.
And did you already have this vision between making a game or making a successful business? Like, I think your first game at Certain Affinity was Age of Booty, and you also created the Mag Pack for Halo 2. And starting this journey as a support studio, I wonder what if it was like a planned strategy to be a support studio to gain experience, money, exposure, and reputation before going back to developing your own game? Or did you see the support aspect as a business opportunity and you oriented your studio in this way?
It was a complicated scenario when I started Certain Affinity, so I'm trying to think how to answer it, but it's very clear. I think that when I started Certain Affinity, I was in fact setting out to do lead development on a very big, ambitious game, and a first-person shooter. Also, it wasn't Age of Booty that was the dream game, though I love Age of Booty. I had a lot of fun. Um, that wasn't why I started Certain Affinity. I was it's actually interesting to talk about it in the context of the choice between prioritizing business or your vision, because the reality is while I was still working for Bungie and Microsoft, while I was setting up Certain Affinity, and while I was negotiating with Microsoft to spin off and continue um, work on the Halo 2 map pack, et cetera, um, I was also putting the pieces in place to allow me to develop this dream game, if you will, right? And it was a sci-fi action RPG. Our code name, working title was Babylon back then. So I had a lot of work that I put in, and that's when I was setting up Certain Affinity, but before I had really jumped, before I had committed fully, given notice and left, the that process, some problems arose. I won't go into the details, but it was clear it wasn't going to work out the way I wanted, because I was also negotiating for rights to certain game engines and technology. And when that hit a roadblock and it became clear that that wasn't going to happen, I had a choice I had to make. Do I give up on this idea, or do I continue, knowing that knowing that I'm not setting myself up to be able to do this game that I was very passionate about, very excited about right out the gate, right? That's going to be years down the road. And I made that decision very consciously, knowing that it was going to take a lot of time from the founding of Certain Affinity to building to the point where I could actually do that game. But my original plan gave me a huge head start, where I was going to be able to really hit the ground running on working on that game that I was very passionate about at the time. So yeah, I think I think I went in eyes wide open, knowing that I admit I was a little bit grumpy, unhappy with the way that things had transpired, and it kind of motivated me to say, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway. But I wasn't naive. I knew that I knew that I was going down what was going to be a difficult path. Essentially, I had a plan, I had a master plan and a vision. And before I even technically left Bungie and Microsoft and founded Certain Affinity, my plan hit a roadblock, and I was forced to pivot before I even left. So I pivoted to a new business strategy, and went out and sought codev, and very quickly ended up signing up to do co-development on Left 4 Dead with Valve, along with we pitched an original game to Capcom, Age of Booty, and we were doing the Halo 2 map pack. So very, very quickly, we had our first year, 2007, our first full year. Very, very quickly, we had sort of pivoted from the original strategy to doing 2 co-dev projects and 1 original lead dev project. And I changed my strategy really from day one when we officially opened our doors. I was already telling my staff that we were on a 10-year plan. And when we were 10 years old as a company, we would be ready to do a really big, ambitious AAA, big budget action game, shooter. Obviously, that's the core of what we do. So yeah, I had already pivoted, and then the game that we're pitching the in end of August is it's not the same game. It's not the Babylon game that I was originally concepting years and years and years ago. It's something new and different, very different, but it's still a shooter. but it's not the original game. But the vision of being able to do lead development on a original IP and do some very novel, very creative, very unusual things never changed. Uh, it's just a very different approach 16 years later.
Yeah, pivoting seems to be the important word here. Like, basically, you soon face the fact that developing your own game, your dream game, I would say, might be more difficult than anticipated. And you recently hired Paul Sams, which is your chief operation officer, right?
President and COO.
All right. And as you're working on several projects as a support studio, for example, the team of about 100 of developers you have on the Halo project you talked about a few months ago, like how do you manage to split your resources to be both a support studio and working on your own game?
No, it's a good question. It's certainly challenging. We have three projects. Well, 3.1 I call it today. We have three big ones and one small one. Um, one of them is a continued partnership with 343, which I can't go into the details on, and that's actually our biggest project today. Um, one of them is it's actually another totally unannounced relationship, co-development on something very big and very exciting that's brand new. It's an original IP that we're doing. We're doing co-development with them. That's a smaller team, maybe around 30, 35 people. And that's nothing about our relationship there is announced yet. That'll probably won't get announced until December, I would guess. Um, but it's great. It's going really well. I'm very excited about it. And then we have a third and a very small fourth project that we're self-funding. Um, and we've been self-funding this original game, building a playable prototype and a demo. I think we've been self-funding it since last fall, really since Gamescom last year. I came out of Gamescom last year and decided I'm going to do this and started putting the pieces in place and really sort of spun up the full development team, in maybe December. Yeah, we've been paying out of pocket for that. And it's just, you work hard. We try and be very responsible about, saving money and spending money. And then slowly you build up some, slowly you build up some savings. And then we're investing those savings in building this demo and building this original game, but we can't take it all away, right? Game at the scale that we're at, and even our people in the indie community will laugh because our self-funding a playable prototype, which maybe is sort of like a vertical slice, probably 30 people. Hey, Alex.
Allô, messieurs. Bonjour.
Hey, Alex, thanks for joining us.
Can you hear me? Écoutez-moi.
Oh, you speak French. I didn't know about that.
Hear you. Hold on.
We can hear you, Alex, but you can't hear us. All right. While Alex gets his audio going, I'll finish. So we're essentially self-funding this, but we can't do that forever because we're slowly, spending our savings. So we have to go out and pitch it and find a partner, find someone to provide further funding, et cetera. So that it's a gamble, but no risk, no reward. So it's a chance we have to take.
Game